Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery preparing to check in on the newest of my worm bins, and in my wormery all the old stuff is off to the left and all the newest stuff is over here on the right. And that's at least up to the shelf over here. This Vermibag Mini is among my older systems actually. I'm just talking about the shelved systems. I go left to right for the most part. The little switchback trick over there in terms of keeping things sequentially in order. But the oldest of my systems are over here. And it's been 12 days since we last checked in on these little guys, these red wigglers. And I think they're probably due for a feeding. So I was going to get these guys up on the bench, slip on a glove, and give them a little feeding. So let's get to work. So bin number 1 on the left and bin number 2 on the right, all set to get fed with some yummy cantaloupe melon and banana peel on the menu today. And besides the yummy assortment of fruits that we've got for them, I've got a whole bunch of somewhat moldy and rather old coffee. And I've also got some breadcrumbs that I'd like to try to do away with, or at least some of them. I got grit, I've got various other things to help enhance the worm bin feeding experience. Oh man, a lot of castings went flying off that plastic. I wonder if I could leave some of them here in the system rather than shaking them off at the table. And these top coverings, I bet you these top coverings went in brand new. Yeah, I believe last time we were finding the previous incarnations of these top covering newspapers to have been just way too far gone to be reused, so they were replaced. These are, I guess, 12 days of wear. This one is definitely more worn. Like I think it would be difficult to get this one spread out as a top covering at the end, but you know, sometimes we challenge ourselves and try to do the things that seem difficult just because. Alright, so last time we fed 12 days ago, I'm trying to remember what it was. I don't even remember. It was it would have been down the middle, even though we don't have feeding zone indicators, or maybe we did and they just got eaten up and were beneath those top covering newspapers. And the coffee I'm feeding them today is just a collection of many days in a carton with no filters included. So perhaps this feeding will end without feeding zone indicators, unless I've got some sort of a special feeding project going on where I'm trying to see how things go in a bin where I change the feeding location each time and stuff like that. It's probably safe to assume that the feeding would have occurred down the middle of the bin. That's just my common way to go about it. Here's the stem of a banana from some previous feeding. This also looks like banana peel. And a couple other larger objects that are obviously leftover foods, possibly just more banana peels, probably what that was. And a little bit of this and that, but certainly not much as far as leftovers go. That's how it looks to me. Alright, let's get the feeding zone in bin number 2 excavated. And then I guess we're gonna have to break into my prepared bedding supply. These systems definitely seem like they're making good progress in terms of breaking down whatever original bedding materials they were built with, because I see very little bedding type materials. Everything seems like a whole bunch of just, you know, pretty heavily worked down worm castings at this point. So definitely gotta remind myself to be generous with the bedding. I didn't even bring out the prepared bedding that's up on my shelf behind me. Usually I try to lay out all the things that I expect to use, but I didn't really know what to expect here. I figured perhaps a couple systems that are still just less than 2 months old might still have a good amount of bedding left in them from the original launch, but you know, these bins I believe were populated with close to 3,000 worms, or perhaps even over here in bin number 1 we might have over that many. So I don't remember what the numbers are. I had written them down, but I left them on my little information board up on my desk, so I'm winging it as far as information goes today. Let me get some bedding. I went out in the garden yesterday to replenish my supply of leaves. So this box is topped off, and I even went to the extra effort this time to really break everything down, like crush it, you know. So leaf stems, yeah, this is a pretty long one. For the most part, I tried to crush them all to be at least, you know, broken in half. Here and there we're going to find a full leaf stem, but I think this will be a much finer batch of dry leaves than my usual, just based on how I prepped them before throwing them in this box over here. And it does seem like we could be pretty generous. Got to keep in mind that we're going to be sucking up some surrounding moisture, I assume, by placing all this dry stuff in here. Okay, sorry. I've had instances where I tried to put something down behind me. I think it was my prepared bedding box. Yeah, the plastic box, and it broke because it fell off the shelf because I was so hasty and just trying to get it out of my hands and put it down somewhere. And I just put that leaf box on somewhere where it's a little bit sketchy. Can't leave it there, probably fall. But I had already occupied most of the space around me, so I'm spraying in some of this mosquito dunks solution. I'm not seeing any flying insect situations going on down here. I guess we're doing it as more of a preventative measure. I would have normally sprayed it out onto the system right in the beginning to coat whatever materials had been out on the surface, where if there were any wise guy little flying insects trying to make themselves at home, they'd probably be in that top layer of material, or their eggs, or their larvae, or whatever. So that's usually why I try to get that in there early. But despite the fact that I put things right out in front of myself on the shelf, I still totally space out on things sometimes. So yeah, we're not giving them a terribly large feeding as far as the kitchen scraps go today. You know, oftentimes you'll see me feed quantities of stuff, triple, quadruple that right there. Well, we're not done yet, because I do want to get a good bit of this coffee fed to the worms, and this thing was filled up to the top. I managed to get rid of some of it in one of my worm feedings the other day, but I did imagine that today's check-in with these little guys could also help us get pretty close to depleting what's in here. And I think what's remaining in this is going to be good for whatever next worm feeding I've got on the books. My coffee, I like to throw it in sometimes with worm chow or whatever I've got around. This is breadcrumbs, little something to mix in with the coffee with the underlying yummy fruits below. I'm also going to sprinkle a little bit of crushed eggshell, also pretty similar in consistency, very fine stuff. Well, you got to imagine the size of a little worm's mouth, right? Try to tailor the stuff you're giving them to be the right size to fit, right? So this stuff we'll put a little more on the end. I think we'll use the covering up of the feeding zone now as our reason to just bring in some material from the outside, and then that material from the outside just automatically, as a result, gets inspected and aerated. Many benefits to doing it that way, and that's why I've kind of gotten into doing it that way lately, and I like it. And then sometimes I just deliberately don't mess with the outer edges, and I just kind of backfill the feeding zone as best I can without doing what we're doing now, pulling up the outer edges contents and stirring them up and stuff, and we'll just leave them be. And sometimes I do notice that when we do that, the material out there does seem to get a little bit more compacted and dense and firm, you know, in terms of being able to just plow your hands through it and scoop through it, because it's so tightly packed already. So I think between, you know, having the material loose so the worms can come and go freely without having to exert a great deal of energy, and well, besides that, keeping things aerated to keep things healthy and working properly, those are all great reasons to do the aeration at all. And then those become the excuse, because in the end you're doing it just because you want to check out your worms and your beautiful castings that are accumulating. And they're definitely accumulating quickly for such young bins. I think the nice, generous application of bedding was nice underneath the feeding. But in a system like this, you know, and since we've got a full box of this stuff sitting there right behind me, teetering on the shelf. I think we're going to come back in with the leaves. And we're going to do another thing that I like to do with the leaves sometimes when I've got enough on hand to do it, is to just top coat. And that means we're going to just lay out a nice layer of fresh leaves. And it's so cool because the activity that occurs beneath that stuff, it's like a mulch layer. And when you start peeling some of the, remaining leafy matter back after a certain period of time after a feeding, you come down and you just see, you can tell the worms have been really digging it because they're just castings everywhere, and stuff looks really cool. So hopefully we'll get that sort of a result next time we come back in with these guys. And there again, I put the box right back where I had it before. So hopefully it doesn't end up on the ground. So no feeding zone indicators, but we're just gonna go by what my typical routine is, just to go back to where we would expect the feeding zone to be if there was no marker down the middle. And that was kind of nice. It got a lot of the got a lot of this stuff off my glove. And, I probably should have done it that way from the start. Now I got my clean hand dirty. But that doesn't matter. I'll be heading to the sink momentarily. We're almost done here. This was the top coating newspaper bit that we bits at this point. It's multiple pieces. I think the other one seemed like it was still holding together as a single piece, but this one's been trashed to a certain point. But there's a good bit of it out here. We're just draping it out. It's almost like it's becoming the feeding zone indicator now. Yeah, that's where we fed, right down the middle. As opposed to how this one turned out. This one, for whatever reason, didn't get quite as beaten up or eaten up. It is still in very good shape, and I could be pretty rough handling it. And yeah, I remember that little guy. Was that the same guy that we encountered in the beginning, or was that another one? I wondered how he'd be. I think he'd be alright, because I did fold the paper over to keep him dark and comfortable as we're taking care of getting him and his family fed and checked on today. But that pretty much brings us to the end of this check-in, everyone. And we've, oh, you know what? That's the reason it seemed like we had so little. There's some extra fragments right there. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the check-in. I got a few things to take care of getting cleaned up over here and put away. Luckily not too much. But those things, they're boring. I'm not going to keep you around for that. Before I go really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.